conversation with Bishop Matera. We're also going to open it up as well for questions that anyone may have for him, just on this subject. So, Bishop, you are obviously a veteran when it comes to being, serving in church. You've done this for 40-something years at different levels. And I think it's good to know how you started. What is your story? How did you get into ministry? How did you find yourself in this, in this position of influence that God has given to you? Just a little. How did you find yourself in ministry?
Okay. Well, when I got saved, within about 6 months, I had a burden to share the gospel, and my church was very large, so they didn't even know who I was. So I just went on the New York City subway trains, and I just started giving my testimony, and the power of God would fall. I started seeing hundreds of people come to Christ, and I went on the Staten Island ferry. They took us from Staten Island to Manhattan, and I would take it back. I had 22 minutes, and I preached to anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 people 3 nights a week, and the Spirit of God would fall in power. I was only saved about 6 or 8 months, and so I realized that I was supposed to minister the gospel.
Wow. So how did that translate into full-time ministry?
Well, one of the things I was doing was on Sundays, I would go to Coney Island after church, and I would preach on the boardwalk. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the boardwalk near Nathan's Famous. So I would pick a big spot, and I would share the gospel, and some guys saw me, and they joined me. Next thing you know, somebody invited me to Bible college. And I went away for almost a year to Bible college, and was grounded in the scriptures. And when I came back, I heard that my wife-to-be, which we weren't even dating, was going to Russia for the Moscow Olympics in 1980 to preach the gospel. And I just started praying for her. I had prophecies for her, and nobody believed her. They all thought she was crazy, and they were actually trying to get her into counseling, because one of the prophetic words that she believed that God spoke to her was that she was going to go with her husband. And because I was the only one who wasn't poisoned by all the gossip, because I was away in Bible school, me and her got close, and she depended on me because I was not biased against her, and I just prayed with her, and next thing you know, we started having feelings for each other, and we wound up getting married and engaged 2 months before the Moscow Olympics, and we wound up going there together, proving everybody wrong, that my wife was delusional. And we wound up having an incredible time in the Soviet Union, and when we came back, we used our wedding money. We didn't use wedding money. We got about $3,000 in wedding money, which would be like $50,000 today. That was 1980. We put the whole amount into financing a 6-week trip to the Soviet Union. So we were in 3 cities preaching, and we just trusted God for our furniture. We didn't even have a bed, never mind furniture. We didn't have anything. And so God supernaturally provided, because we put first His kingdom. When we came back from the Soviet Union, we smuggled Bibles into there. There's a lot of crazy stuff that went on there. I could take a half hour. But I was 21, my wife was 22 when we were there. Followed by the KGB. They tried to arrest us. They tried setting us up with black market stuff and all this. But we came back. We had such a liberty to be in a place where there was freedom to preach, because we were in an oppressive environment for 6 weeks. The summer before that, I was actually in Turkey during martial law as a 19-year-old, bringing Bibles door to door to Turkish people. the year that Ayatollah Khomeini took over from the Shah of Iran, there was a revolution in the Middle East. So in Turkey, it was the most radical place in the world at that time with Islam. There were police officers with drawn machine guns in almost every corner, and I was going door to door, and I had to sign a paper so that Operation Mobilization wouldn't be responsible for me getting arrested. I had to sign a paper knowing that there was an 85% chance I would be thrown in a Turkish prison. Miraculously, only 4 of the 22 of us got arrested, which is another miracle. I didn't get arrested, so I was in Turkey for over a month, 2 months traveling. Then the next year I was in Soviet Union, came back, and had already given up my music career. I was on my way to making it very big in music, and I gave that up. And I had no job. I was going to just go find a job at a restaurant or something. And after we came back as a married couple, and the Lord told me to just preach the gospel full time. And I said, well, how am I going to get supported? He said, don't worry, your friends will support you. So my parents and my best friend gave us their tithe, and that's how we survived. And we began evangelizing in Sunset Park. It was one of the worst communities in New York. It was filled with gang violence, drugs, witchcraft everywhere, abandoned buildings everywhere. I saw a 12-year-old kid with a shotgun shooting at a rival gang. I saw 16-year-old kids dead in the street. So it was the Wild Wild West. And we began preaching there, and about 10 to 12 years later, the whole community was totally transformed by the power of God. The witchcraft stores closed down, the gang members were gone, or they weren't visible anymore. They either got saved, got arrested, or died. The drugs went down, way down, and the crime rate went down a tremendous amount. So we broke the principality over that area. We didn't even know we were doing that. And then and now it's a very high-end place. And it's not easy to buy a house there. And that took place before gentrification. As a matter of fact, there's still no gentrification. It's still predominantly Spanish. It's now more Mexican than it was then. When we started, it was mostly Puerto Rican and Dominican, but then it became a mixture of Mexican and Chinese. And now some Caucasians live there as well. But we saw the transformation when it was still relatively Dominican and Puerto Rican. It wasn't because rich people came and pushed them out, and the community got better.
Wow.
Wow.
Woo. So it looks like you have such an attraction for crazy places. Turkey, Russia, some of these very hard places to go. I mean,
That's why I'm here now. You walked right into that, I'm sorry. A bunch of crazy people. I had to pray and fast 3 days before I came here.
I mean, but can you trace anything? Because when you were talking, I love when you were talking, which I've heard you talking about this other times, about how even our pre-wiring before we came to Christ, it is ordained of God. I mean, every creation definitely is of God. What God does when we get saved is actually to redeem that, sanctify, and use it for His purpose, right? Was there anything about your life, prior to coming to Christ, your background, how you grew up, that kind of really pointed to what you were doing now? Is there anything that you can tell us?
Well, one of the motivational gifts in Romans 12 is leadership. He who leads, let him lead diligently. So looking back, I always had a gift of leadership. I would organize softball games, even though I was 11 or 12. I'd organize games for kids 16. Everybody would follow me. I'd get 30 people together, organize bands, that kind of thing. So there was a leadership, ability to organize and lead was there. As far as speaking, that was never there. I had no idea I was able to speak, but influence, yes. And then when I first came to Christ, I thought, God is my witness, I thought I was going to be in the background and just administrate or organize movements and help the church with organization. So I'd be a great project director or executive pastor. I would have been a really good one. But what happened was, and this is a funny story, you talk about sometimes you find your purpose by accident, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is how I found out I could speak. I was saved about, 6 months or something, and I wanted all my old friends to hear the gospel. And I used to have a large following. I was very popular before I was saved. A lot of people followed me, and to hear my playing the guitar. So I said, you know what? I'm going to organize a concert, and I'm going to get all my old friends to come, and then we're going to preach the gospel. So I took several months. I had to get permits. I had to close the park, Fort Hamilton Parkway, Fort Hamilton Park on East 3rd in Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn. And I had about 70, I counted, my old friends there. And I had musicians from the church, and I would play. I would do the blues, I'd do rock, I'd do whatever, just to get them to come. Then I had the church youth leaders preach, and they didn't know what they were doing. They'd get up and they would say things like, and through the righteousness of Christ Jesus, we were imputed his glorification, and my friends are just smoking pot, drinking beer, looking at him like, what is these crazy people talking about? They were preaching Christianese to a group of unsaved heathens that were smoking pot. And it was almost 9 o'clock, it was getting dark. I knew I had about 15 minutes, and I said, I did all this work for nothing. These people don't know what they're doing. I trusted them because they were in the church longer than me, and my friends are laughing, and I did all this for nothing. So in desperation, I took the mic, this is a true story, and I started sharing my testimony. All of a sudden, the power of God came. And then I started preaching the gospel. Next thing you know, within 15 minutes, 16 or 17 out of the 70 came up to the front and bowed their knee to the ground, and they gave their life to Christ. And then we started seeing a mini revival taking place in that area. And a lot of my old friends to this day walk with God. And that's how I knew I'm supposed to preach. I had no clue. Then I started going on the trains, and then next thing you know, it was just extraordinary. That I walked into by accident. I never felt anything in me that I was going to preach or be a pastor.
Wow. So another story you've said, that I thought is very interesting is, you used to be a guitar player. You used to be considered probably one of the best guitar players in the world at the time. We're supposed to really go all over the world with some big musician, and somehow God just interrupted that. I think it's a very interesting story. Maybe I'd like to know, how did God take away that desire or ambition to become the greatest guitar player in the world or something?
Well, the backstory to that was I wanted to be the greatest baseball player in the world. And I was a phenomenal baseball player. I could cover the whole outfield. I wouldn't even need a left fielder or a right fielder. When I played center field, I knew the ball was going at the crack of the bat, and I would just get there. But I played, whatever I get into, I go all the way. I was so committed to baseball that even in the winter, I'd be in my backyard throwing the ball against the jagged concrete wall, because the jagged wall, I couldn't tell where the ball was going. And I'd spend hours catching the ball, going all over the place. Well, I played so much, I blew my knees out. the doctor, I began limping after 2 months during the next baseball season. I was like 12 or 13. The doctor said, man, you just can't make a living in baseball. Because every 2 months, if you stop playing regularly, you're going to have the same issue. I had like bone fragments. So that crushed me. And so there was a guitar in my house. My sister was playing a Gretsch country gentleman guitar. She took lessons. She was a pretty good guitar player when I was only 5, but she never kept it up because she for whatever reason. And it was just sitting there in the living room, and I knew I couldn't play baseball. And I said, you know what? I'm not pushing a pencil when I get older. I need something. I need a sense of purpose. I looked at that guitar. God is my witness. I said, in 4 years, by the time I'm 16, I'm going to be the best guitar player in Brooklyn. And sure enough, when I was 16, I was doing crazy stuff on the guitar. I would play while drinking beer with one hand. I would do riffs that people couldn't even do with 2 hands, or eat a banana. I had hundreds of people follow me. And then, whatever. It was supposed to be playing in Madison Square Garden by the time I was 17. And then, but what happened was, I did love music, don't get me wrong. To this day, I love music. But I realized when I got saved that I never had peace in my life. I only had happiness. And I'm a very logical thinker. I said, well, you know what? The best I'm going to do with the music is make people happy, at that point anyway. But I never had peace, no matter how many people followed me, how much acclaim I had. And I realized that the main reason why I played the guitar was not because of a love of music. It was for a sense of identity. I needed a purpose. I needed to mark my life. I needed to stand out. I needed people to love me. I needed a reason for people to celebrate me. I needed to feel like, I had some kind of importance in this world. And when Christ came in my life, I didn't need that anymore. I had purpose. I had peace for the first time. I had joy for the first time in my life. I knew what happiness was, never joy. And actually 6 months, 8 months, you don't understand. I practiced, I had 3 bands. I had my own studio by the time I was 16. And I would practice guitar. I would keep notes 3 to 8 hours every day. I was so good at reading music that I was playing flute solos on the guitar, trumpet solos, violin, Paganini's violin solos, 64th notes, if you know anything about music. And I was just so committed to it. But once I found Christ, I found that everything I was ever longing for was in Him. Wow. And I was so blown away with the scriptures that slowly I went from practicing the guitar 3 to 8 hours a day to 2 hours. Now what in the world am I playing the guitar for? I could be in the Bible. Next thing you know, I'm never playing anymore. I'm just reading the Bible. Everything that I did with the guitar I transferred to Christianity. I was studying the Bible 6 to 12 hours a day after I got saved. And then after I got baptized in the Holy Ghost, speaking in other tongues, I was able to pray 3 to 5 hours a day. That's all I wanted to do. So I just immersed myself in the scriptures. And when some of my old friends came, and eventually I quit the bands and all that. I was in a jazz band in college. I was in a wedding band to make money, and then I was recording for, we were hoping to submit something to Atlantic Records. We were writing original music. And when I quit the bands, my friends thought I was brainwashed or crazy. And they said, how can you walk away from something like this? I thought you were going to be famous and we could all, hang on your coattails. People were upset. And they said, how could you walk away from something so incredible? And I said to them, I reframed the question. I said, why don't you rather ask me this question? What did you find, or who did you find that was so great that even music would be born? Wow. It was so great that I put everything in his arms. Why don't you ask that question? And that's truly the truth. I mean, to this day, I could still play the guitar at a high level if I wanted to, but I'd rather read the Word of God, pray, If I had a sense of purpose connected to my calling, I'd start playing again at a high level. But, I think it's more of an identity thing. It's not a talent thing only, it's an identity thing. Why are you doing it? And I stopped playing for almost 10 years, and I think, even though God never told me not to play, I felt grieved in the spirit when I played on the church worship team. I just couldn't even do it. I couldn't even follow it. I knew that's not for me. I couldn't do it anymore when I first got saved. So I think what was happening was guitar was an idol in my life. It was my God. It was who I looked at for identity. I looked at myself as a guitar player. It took about 7 years to eradicate that from me. And once that was gone, then God started commanding me to start playing again. So for probably 30 years, I did play a lot in the church, only to glorify God. But I haven't played much in about 10, 12 years. But before that, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube. You can look up Joseph Matera does Hendrix, or Bishop does Hendrix. Bishop does the blues, Joseph Matera in concert, or some Hillsong stuff. So there's about 30 things. There's jams, there's jazz, there's different things if you ever look it up on YouTube. But I haven't done anything in about 12 years, just because I'm so busy traveling.
Wow. That's amazing.
But I never got back to the level I could have been, because I never practiced a lot again. So what you see on YouTube is good, but it wasn't where I was going when I was saved when I was 19. Believe me, I would have been 10 times better.
All right. I'm gonna open it up, so if you can get some mics, ushers can help us for anyone that will have a question. The question can be from what was taught today, yesterday, or anything, but make sure it's connected to service, leadership, so it's more focused on what the theme of the conference is, all right? But I'd like anyone has while we're preparing for that, you've shared a little bit about some of the basic disciplines that made you such an effective leader, effective co-worker of Christ, especially in your area of calling. You're speaking to a lot of, obviously, people here who are workers. They love the Lord. They want to, find their purpose. Some of them have found their purpose, but they want to excel and be the best. You are definitely one of the best in what you do. God has really used you greatly at a higher level. You have probably preached in almost every major nation, major conferences in America. You can walk into any church in America today, literally, and you get the mic and speak. Are there some spiritual disciplines that God taught you over the years as you serve, that allow you to really operate at the top level in your area of calling?
Well, quickly, I would just say you have to prioritize seeking the Lord more than anything else. So if it's best for you to do it early in the morning, then get up early before your work and try to go through the Bible once a year, spend enough time in prayer. You'll know how much time you need as you continue to grow. God will increase the capacity. Some people are not good in the morning, so do it at night, all right? God's not legalistic. So I would say develop a consistent prayer and devotional time. The second thing I would say would be try to, somebody talked about they have to write notes. I'm incredibly organized. I have so many files. I write every single thing down. I have checklists for CCC, for my assistant, for MMI, for different things. And I look at it constantly. I have something on my phone, but I also have a paper planner so I don't mess up and I don't miss anything. And I'm constantly, maybe 10, 20 times a day, looking at what I have to do. So that's important. You have to think ahead, plan ahead, always think ahead. Plan ahead. Person who doesn't plan plans to fail. God wants order. He doesn't want chaos in your life. So that's important. A third thing I would say is focus. Focus. Keep the main thing in your life. It's okay to socialize, okay to have hobbies, but don't spend most of your time with things that don't align with your calling and your mission. All right? Fourth thing is to have a work-life balance. I work out physically. I watch my health. My body's a temple of the Holy Ghost. With the way I travel, if I don't eat right, if I don't work out, I am not going to live long enough to have quality. Especially when you travel, you got to walk, you got to carry bags, you got to, it's very tedious. So you got to be disciplined with your physical health. You got to watch what you eat. There's a certain amount of time I fast every day. Some call it intermittent fasting. I'm very focused and meticulous on my schedule, on what I eat. I don't eat junk food. I don't eat processed food. And I work out. So you have to have some sort of physical exercise if you don't have, a labor job like sanitation or construction. Fifth thing, get enough sleep. If you don't sleep enough, you will not operate at a high capacity. Whatever that is for you. With me, I need about 6.5 hours of sleep, maybe 7. If I get less than 6.5 hours, I'm not good. I know that. You might need 8 hours or 9 hours, whatever. You got to know your own body. So instead of staying up late watching sports, I'm a Yankee fan, and I love the fact they went to the World Series, but I'll tell you right now, if I had to pick between seeking God and watching the Yankees, I had to do that. Once it turned 10 o'clock, and I'm starting to get tired, and I don't know who's going to win the game, I said, you know what? In 3 months, nobody's going to care. And I know I care right now, but what's more important is going to sleep. So you also have to prioritize. I went to sleep and I said, I'll find out tomorrow who's going to win the World Series. Went to bed so I could get up early to pray and work out. So you got to prioritize what is important. So many people, they spend hours on Facebook too. What is that going to do for you? Tell me. It's okay to keep in touch with friends, of course. It's a quick way to keep in touch with friends. But do you spend more time on Facebook than in the Word of God? I think most Christians do. I'm sorry. So there's priorities. So that's the fifth thing, is prioritize your life. You have to have it in order. Otherwise, you keep hoping for something to change, but you don't change your habits, nothing's going to change.
Wow. I think the most important thing is, as Christians, we got to really recognize how much value we bring to the world, how much God has placed, in our lives, and how much we really need to manage our life. Because, when you're a very important person, you manage your time very well, because a lot depends on you, right? When you're a leader, when you're a CEO, they don't have a lot of time to do many things, but they know that their time is important. They value their time. They order their priorities. I think as Christians, we're even more important than that. As far as God's plan and purpose for the world, we need to know that God depends on us. And we're already busy people, right? We're already busy people. We have job, we have family. We need to serve God. So we need to know that we cannot just compete with the unbelievers on other things they do, party, clubs, spending hours and hours on sports or things like that. So we need to kind of know that we cannot try to be like the world. Then we're not going to be able to fulfill God's plan and purpose for our lives. So I think it's something we have to think about, that our life is so important, is so valuable. That we need to really order our priorities, just not be like the world. Now, any question so I'm waiting for anyone to have someone raising their hands.
Hi, my name is Daniela, and I have a question. So you were talking about when you were preaching being healed first before you start to serve, and identifying people and their brokenness. So what happens when, while you're serving, you go through something that's traumatic, because life has different ebbs and flows. And what I've noticed is people do a lot of silent suffering where they don't tell people what they're going through, and you have no idea that they're going through something. So my question is, are there systems in place to help people deal with that within this church? And is it can they take a step back, do certain things to get them back in the time frame, especially if they have a lot of responsibilities and they're excelling and all of a sudden something happens?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's very specific to this church. What ministry do you serve?
So I just joined 2 ministries, so information and, usher, but I haven't officially started.
Okay, that's awesome. So, great. We got some coming from a new working. So we do have a system in place. That's part of what OWARD does. We have Office of Workers Affairs. And it is our common understanding here in Agape House of Worship that if you're going through personal times you are not able to serve, you can actually opt out of serving for a period of time. All right? So nobody's going to really look down on you or say you, or make you feel like you're failing God somehow because you're going through some personal crisis or challenges and you need to take time off. All right? Having said that, you need to communicate that to your ministry leader. So you start by communicating to your ministry leader. Be open and let him know that this is what is going on. And even if you're a minister, some of the ministers here have taken time off due to some challenges. 6 months, a year. I kind of need to focus on some things personally in my life. And he allows us to even support them through those processes, pray with them, check on them. That is the attitude here. So your ministry leader will support you through that. If you need counseling, you need to see any of the ministers. That is, so the common understanding is there. You just have to open up and come out instead of just not show up. And they don't know. Sometimes people just don't show up. Don't tell anyone. They don't know. They're checking on you. So I think that's sometimes when there's a challenge because they don't know what is going on. So openness is always very good. Great question. Thank you. We have somebody? Okay.
Good afternoon. I have a question about number 7. You were talking about healing. How do you handle it when someone may be broken or they need healing and you recognize it as a leader, but that person may come from a culture or a worldview where therapy is a bad word, or they may feel that therapy is for someone who's not them? How do you handle that?
So it's a challenge in certain cultures around here. I do try to attack that every once in a while to let people know that therapy is a great way to get help. What therapists do is really just to help you understand your problem, understand sometimes the history or this, why you're having the problem. Therapies are great in helping you understand what is going on. So we do talk about it. I think we have to just continue to talk about it. Now, as a leader, I think the way you handle it is just to let that person know, get a trusted person to talk to them. Sometimes, things can come from trusted people. You can get a minister to talk to them. You can get me to talk to them. We have to figure out ways to really help people embrace anything that will help them to get healing. And sometimes healing comes by combination of many of these things, right? We have people in our church, for example, who can do inner healings prayer, right? They take two people with inner healing, deliverance, therapies. It's not either or. Sometimes, a lot of time, people actually need a combination of all this over a long period of time to actually get to where they are freer, they are more healed, they are more whole, so that they can get to where God wants them to be. All right. Any more questions? Okay. So we have.
So, sir, you talked about a time where you were playing the guitar for a number of hours, and that translated into reading the Bible and also speaking in tongues. So, I'd like you to speak to consistency, which helps in spiritual growth and maturity for a new believer and also for a believer that tends to kind of procrastinate or has been inconsistent with their daily living.
Well, the word disciple was used the most in the New Testament, along with the word name called believer. The word Christian is only used twice. The word disciple is where we get our word discipline. You cannot be a disciple of Christ if you're not disciplined. So there are great books out like The Spirit of the Disciplines by, I forgot the guy's name, and then there's another one called The Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. I think The Spirit of Disciplines is even better, but I forgot the guy's name. But A Celebration of Discipline, a great, great book, and that goes through all the spiritual disciplines that people should practice. And that's a great book. So you cannot grow as a Christian if you're not disciplined. If you don't have set times when you pray. You should probably have a place where you go to. Jesus called it, go in your closet. So I have some kind of closet. Don't take your cell phone. Make sure you don't have distractions, that you're focused on God. And try to develop a devotional life where, at least for 1 hour a day, you're going through the Bible one time a year. So you read 3 chapters of the Old Testament a day, chronologically, 3 chapters in the New Testament a day, and you'll want to get through the Bible once a year. And develop a prayer life. There's a little, I used to draw a circle, a pie chart. 5 minutes I'd wait on God. 5 minutes I'd praise. 5 minutes I would intercede. 5 minutes I'd supplicate. 5 minutes I'd read the Psalms. I divided it into a 1 hour of 5 minutes each. And I would do that when I first got saved because I couldn't really pray. I got bored to death with prayer. After 5 minutes because my mind, I was more of an intellect when I got saved. So I used to read books on philosophy, world history, a lot of classics. I used to read, all these mystery novels, comic books. I was constantly reading the paper. So my mind was developed when I got saved. So I could read the Bible 12 hours a day. But my spirit was not developed. I could hardly pray 5 minutes and I knew it was bad. So that's when I developed a pie chart to help me accountable. So I'd pray an hour a day and I would read the Bible, whatever I can. Then after I started speaking in tongues, I bypassed my mind. I didn't need the pie chart anymore. I was able to pray, many hours after that. So the disciplines are very, very important. So books like the Celebration of Discipline is important. So that would help.
All right, I have the Celebration of Discipline. It's a very great book. I will add the Spirit of the Disciplines to my archive. You can kind of really display that so that people can see us, Russia, the books. All right. Okay. All right. We have Deborah.
Hi. Have either of you ever been in a situation in ministry where you're leading a ministry or leading a team of people where you felt like maybe there was an individual that that wasn't their calling or their ministry, or they weren't supposed to be there? And if you have, what did you do?
Everybody has been there multiple times. There's no one way. I wish there's a magical way you can just, you know how when you're in PowerPoint, you just take this box and just put it in, and everything just goes fine. Now we're dealing with people with feelings, emotions, different level of maturity. So sometimes some of these things calls for wanting to really help people, preserve people, not allow them to get hurt, offended, maybe lose their faith altogether. So I think in a church environment, it's something that requires a lot of prayer, sometimes patience. I'll tell you, a lot of time people, even in this church, have stayed in other positions or places we put them who don't belong there. They've stayed longer because I just felt, I think it's better to just allow God to resolve this, because your concern sometimes could damage people's faith. So it's not all the time that it is easy, like when you are in the corporate world, you can just fire people, you can remove people anyhow, you don't care about how you can impact their life, their faith, all those things. So there's a lot that is in play. Now, so this is the best thing. The best thing is obviously to assess who the person is, right? Who are they? What's their level of maturity? When people are mature, it's actually very easy, right? You can easily just talk to them, encourage them, and get them into where they can serve properly. Sometimes when people are not so mature and they have a lot of people like that tend to have certain personality traits that can be very difficult. And I think that's when you usually have that problem. They're stubborn, they want to be there, they recognize they're looking for trouble sometimes, and not all the time. So it can sometimes take a little bit of time to try to get them to a place where we can move them or maybe encourage them, because you also want to be careful to not let people deal with rejection, right? That can really, really damage them. So it could be very, very, very dicey in a church environment to do things because clearly the Bible still wants us to care for one another. The Bible still wants us to really be very pastoral in how we'll deal with things. So it will be on a case-by-case basis. Some cases will be very easy, where it's as easy as, move from here to here. Some case, maybe you need to work with them to improve. Some people can improve. Sometimes you need to, allow time, because there are some of these cases tend to just get resolved in the passage of time. Some of these cases will even teach you as a leader patience, right? How to deal with, they're not always the same. I think they are very, very different. It depends on what we are dealing with. So it would be better to just deal with that specific case and just ask God for wisdom on how to deal with it. I'm sorry to disappoint you. It wasn't an easy answer. I don't know if you have something to say, Bishop.
No, perfect answer.
Okay.
So, you talked about the importance of having a growth community. So, how do you identify a season where you actually need a mentor? In addition to attending events like this, how do you identify if you're in a season where you actually need an individual to mentor you into what God has for you? And then the second question is, some people consider that your mentor finds you, you don't find them. So, is that the right way of looking at it and just letting it come to you? Or should you pursue or actively search for someone to mentor you?
All right. Okay. So the first question has to do with your growth community, right? So the question is, how do you find them? Finding your mentor. So I think it can go either ways. But I think it's better for you to be the one to really approach someone to mentor you. more often than not, it can really come across. It doesn't end well if someone just say, "I want to mentor you." I think, I think mentorship relationship should really come with permission from the person that wants to be mentored. I mean, mentoring people is not easy. You're going to correct them. I mean, if they haven't given you that permission, I mean, it's not going to work. And there are people, and even when people are mentoring you, people can know how much you want them to be involved in your life. I remember one time, one person in the church, they didn't come to, I think I asked them, "Are you coming to the retreat?" And they said, "No, I'm not coming. I mean, you can see I'm not coming." All right, so they didn't come. No, they eventually came. So she came to me later and said, so I saw them at the retreat. I'm like, "Wow, that was great. I'm glad you came." So she came to me, "Pastor, why didn't you force me to come to the retreat? I told you I wasn't coming and you were okay with that." I said, to be honest, I don't feel I have such a freedom with you to really compel. Because even though I'm pastor of everybody, I know people who have given me that express permission to tell them things, and they will. So in every relationship, everybody kind of know how much influence they have over that person. Because at the end of the day, every leadership is influence. It's not by force. So at the end of the day, if you want someone to mentor you, if you feel you need mentor, you need mentor, or you need mentorship. And I think almost everybody needs a form of mentorship. All right, almost everybody. Even people who are already operating at high levels, they still have mentors. All right. I hear Bishop Matera call some people his father in the faith. Right. So even every one of us. But I think it's something to pray about. As a believer, just pray and ask the Holy Spirit to lead you. And try to develop a relationship with that person that you admire, that you feel like they have something that, and just ask them, "I'd like you to speak into my life. I'd like you to be my, to mentor me, to help me to become what God wants me to become. Maybe we meet every month or every quarter or something like that." So I think it's very easy, and that's why being part of a church community actually helps that. All right. I think we want to do 2 more so we can close. All right. So I'll do my sister in the back, then I will. Go ahead.
Thank you for that answer. That was one of my questions about mentorship, especially in the spiritual, and also because somebody could be able to mentor you spiritually, but then maybe if you're doing something that is outside, let me say in the marketplace, sometimes it can be a struggle to identify a mentor that will align with your values.
Yeah.
So how do you merge that? And the second question I have is aligning talent with your purpose or your calling. Sometimes you realize that you are multi-talented. Maybe you are good in so many things, and maybe over the years you've served in those different capacities, and then at times it could be a struggle to align where do all these abilities that I have, how do they align with that which God is calling me to do? Sometimes that is a little struggle, so that's my question. How do you align, if you find yourself you're a multi-talented person, how do you align it with God's call for your life?
So I think some of the things Bishop talks kind of address that, using some of those resources. Some of those tests will be very, very helpful to really be able to narrow your purpose. And frankly, some things just come over time too. Some things just come over time, because I think, at least for me, I think over time when you do, let's say you're a multi-talented person, you do so many things well, then just keep doing them. and keep praying and asking God, over time you're going to really see that God narrows your focus, right? Some things are just going to have, some things are just going to fall off. Some things are just going to fall off in terms of interest. We're going to just see that you're now narrowing your focus. So some things will just happen because of time. Some things will happen because of situations that God placed you, right? God also places you in different situations. Some things will come in seasons, right? Seasons will just determine this is what will happen. Some things happen because of opportunities. God uses open doors to really even narrow us to what He wants us to do. He just closes doors in some things, and you know that this is what He wants you to do now. But I think it's a lifelong thing, but it's something also to pray about, to seek counsel about, if you're struggling with, because, being multi-talented person, because that could lead to dissipation, where you're just so spreading, and you're not able to really have excellence in any area. So doing so many things because you are just talented in everything can really be a problem, but it's something to confront and address. I'm going to ask Carol, do you have a mic? Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. Bishop Matera, you spoke about visionary leaders and how we tend to see the bigger picture, and I often tend to see the big picture and the end result. And it's really difficult sometimes to express that clearly and effectively, where I feel that sometimes because I want that end result, I end up taking on too much on my plate. So what strategies would you suggest that will help me articulate my vision clearly and effectively, where I can now delegate it a lot better to minimize that workload?
Well, every visionary leader needs a strategic leader who work with them so that they could map out the strategy, how to get from A to Z. And then you need an operational leader that creates systems to implement the strategy. So just having vision without strategy is not going to be effective. So you shouldn't have all that burden on you. Some people do have gifts in vision and strategy at the same time, but one is always dominant. So just to take a burden off you, it's good to have somebody else who is more dominant in strategy if you're dominant in vision. If you're dominant in strategy, have someone else dominant in vision, and then have somebody who's really good at figuring out how to match the strategy to assimilate to the systems of the church. You can't have your own systems that don't flow with the systems of the church, but you can create a flow within that ministry department that is now part of the church systems, whether it's planning center, CCB, whatever else you guys might use, workforce, Salesforce, I don't know what you guys use, but there's we use so many different systems, but yeah, so you gotta utilize systems, strategy to help the vision be, of course you write everything out, that's the phase that everything gets started.
Before we go, I'd like you to address, sometimes we do have instances where it's a family, a lot of people here are family people. You have instances where someone is excited about serving, the spouse is not excited about serving, someone is serving at a higher level, the spouse is not serving at that higher level, and that can cause, some frictions. Any thoughts on how people can maybe help their spouse, or just be, manage that kind of tensions that can sometimes arise within the family dynamics about, their level of service, based on many years of experience?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would do, I would put them with a marriage mentor, because there may be a reason why one of the spouses is resentful or doesn't want them to serve. Could be because they're neglecting things in the house. It's not because they're not on fire for God or they're not committed to the things of God. It could be that, they're out 5 nights a week serving and the kids aren't getting help with homework, meals aren't cooked. So it could be something where there has to be a marital, the root issue might be a marital issue more than a spiritual issue. So that's where the marriage counseling would be helpful. The other thing would be, if it is a spiritual issue, the spouse has to try to work with the one that's not as committed. But if the spouse that's not committed wants them to not follow the Lord, then they should listen to them. So you also have to work with that dynamic. What is it that, can I accommodate the spouse that's not as committed without compromising my calling? You have to figure that out. Again, it's probably marriage counseling there. And then you also have to figure out, is there a way the committed spouse is acting that turns off the uncommitted spouse from the things of God? Maybe they're a hypocrite at home. Maybe they're judgmental. If it's a wife, maybe she's always comparing the husband to the pastor. That's going to get them angry at the pastor. He feels like the pastor is his competition. The pastor doesn't even know who his husband is, maybe. Or doesn't even know that's a dynamic going on. So it could be some common sense things that can be worked out. The other thing could be one of the spouses is trying to control or push or change their other spouse. And you got to realize you cannot change your spouse. God never called you to change your spouse. And if you ever think, you're going to change someone once you marry them, you're going to find out that doesn't work. A lot of, especially women, they think, oh yeah, I'll marry this guy and he'll change because he promised he'll change. Are you marrying your husband or your son? You don't want to be the mother to your husband. So you cannot change your spouse. You got to let the Lord change them. So that is a very complicated situation. I would have to know the context. I would start with marriage counseling. And then if the person's not in church, I would have one of the pastors make an appointment to meet with the spouse, to hear that person's heart, and that would go a long way in softening the person's heart. Because they might think that they're being judged by the church, by the spouse, and that, they're maybe even to a point where they're resentful against the church, or maybe they feel embarrassed. So making an appointment with the spouse who's not in church might even be a good thing. So there's a lot of different angles, all depending on the context. And many times I've found the problem may be a marital issue, or it could be the committed spouse who's not sensitive to the uncommitted spouse, and or maybe neglecting the things in the house. So that's a long answer to a short question.
All right, can we put our hands together for Jesus? That's becoming a marriage conference. Can we put our hands together and thank God for it? All right, I think we want to retake our picture. All right. There's a very important person that was missing from the first picture. So we're going to